An apple a day keeps the doctor away, but a glass of OJ keeps the adversary at bay. Here's Oddjob. It's time for a glass of OJ. I'm Oddjob.
Now DNSPrincess.
So, you might remember last time I had DNS on, and we've slept a lot since then, but we haven't changed our clothes through the magic of movies and Hollywood. Which, if this is Hollywood, holy hell, is very cheap. The last time we talked about what types of pen tests there are, what kind of firms that do them, how do you know when you're ready for a pen test, and we still might talk a little bit about that today, and when a pen test isn't a pen test. But first, before we continue on to the rest of really what we want to talk about, which is, hey, you know you're ready for a pen test, and now we're going to jump into how to buy that pen test and follow through with it. Just a reminder, these opinions are ours. They're not the opinions of our respective employers. Nobody is sponsoring this video. We pretty much aren't naming anybody, regardless of whether we like something or don't like something, to protect the guilty and the innocent. Yeah, again, these are just our opinions and not those of anybody else. And we're not lawyers. There might be some things where we talk about agreements or legal agreements. We're not lawyers either. So make sure you ask a lawyer about anything contractual we're discussing here. But anyway, with that being said, we're going to now jump into, once you've identified what your drivers are, what your goals are for a pen test, how do you engage a firm, and how do you prepare for a pen test, and how do you follow through with it? So, you know, where do we start here?
Okay, we're little penetration testing babies.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
We've never had baby's first pen test. Are we ready? Right. Well, we were talking about like this crawl, walk, run model.
Yeah.
And this is just a light suggestion. It'll always vary on how mature your security team is, what kind of support you have, what your budget is. All these things contribute to your maturity. So maybe you're ready to walk faster than someone else is. But we decided that for the crawl, it was going to be more like baby's first Vuln scan.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you done Vuln scans before, OJ?
A few.
Yeah.
I've done a few. And I would even say have a vulnerability management program in place. Even if that vulnerability management program is just doing a quarterly scan of some scope, could be external, maybe you've got your PCI, maybe you've got something else that you very much care about, and you're starting there. Do you even have your process in place to identify, to prioritize, to remediate, to report, have those kind of basic processes in place? Because guess what? Those processes are going to be used for remediating the pen test too. So you're going to need to have those already in place in order to make a pen test effective. Because sure, you're going to get a report. Okay, now what are you going to do with it?
We're going to ignore it.
Yes.
So that we don't have any problems. And we're blissfully unaware.
So and that also is not just the scanning and the tools. I would be doing my compliance and governance risk folks complete disservice if I didn't say make sure you've got policies and processes defined, and that's important too. You can't secure people through paper, but paper does help you secure things. It's kind of weird how that works.
Yeah.
So anyway, so you do a vulnerability management scan. You start, remediating the obvious, the low-hanging fruit, and you go, I think we're ready for our first pen test, right? Because now that's a walking phase.
That is our walk.
Yeah.
And walking is very important, your first step. But I'm not so interested in talking about walking because I feel like that's all we've been talking about is walking. So for running, that is what we really decided was more like what we were calling the objective-based pen test or red teaming.
Come in, get domain admin, find this little piece of IP, do whatever you got. There's no real scope except for stick to our assets.
Yeah.
That's the scope. That's the 10/8. You know, that's the big saying.
Please narrow it down more than that.
But you know, you've got it figured out. You know what your stuff is. We're gonna drop you in, or we're gonna have you come from external. Here's your goal, and you're not getting that coverage of vulnerabilities. You're not saying, here's all the vulnerabilities, we exploited every single one of them. It's, we found a thing, we got in, and we ignored everything else because we were focused on the objective, just like an attacker would be.
Exactly.
Attacker's not going to exploit every single vulnerability.
No.
They're going to just do the ones that got them in. And to the next, to the next, to the next, until they go.
Yep.
Yeah. Very cool. So, so you're shopping for a pen test.
Yes.
Right. So, or, you know, in this case, we're walking, and we may even be running. So, right, you know, we could be talking pen tests. We could be talking running. So maybe you're a person who has done pen testing for a while. Maybe you want to know about Red Team. We're going to talk about what you want to ask for from a pen test firm. What do you want to talk to them about, whether it's Red Team or whether it's pen test. So what's something that you would want to see someone ask a pen test firm?
Actually, OJ, I wanted to ask you because hypothetically, let's say hypothetically, I worked for a pen test firm. And
hypothetically, I worked for a customer of a pen test firm.
Correct. So let me turn around on you. I would say, just to cut out the low hanging fruit for you, so you can't take the good answers. A sample report with methodology documents are big, but those are obvious.
And the reason why I like that is because sometimes you may have customers that want to see very specific things in the report you give them.
Yes.
Sometimes you want a full report and a customer-facing report.
Yes.
Not just maybe a memo. Sometimes you just get a memo or some kind of like attestation.
Yes.
That's fine. But sometimes they're like, well, let's see the bigger report. Let's see. And it's not going to be the real full every single detail report, but something I can give customers that gives them the thing they need to feel secure or happy, right?
Right.
So there's, or other stakeholders, third parties. There's other third parties who will ask for a pen test sample report. I want to see what your report looks like. And will you customize it?
Yeah, exactly. I think those are two easy things to ask.
Yeah.
And things that any good pen test firm should have available. Sometimes I think the rest of the items that you're about to mention may be wishy-washy or just uncertain, especially during the time of the year. But if a pen test firm can't give you a sample report and a methodology document, you should be concerned.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll have those concerns later as well. Stick around to the end of the video because that's where we're going to talk about red flags.
Yes.
So
let me ask you, Mr. Customer.
Yes.
What would you like to ask me?
So I would like to ask, how far out are you booked?
Well, that's a great question. There is a wrong answer to this question. But it's important to ask because even if it doesn't align to your expectations or your due date, it's really important to understand just how long they're booked. It might be for a season that they're overly booked or underbooked. Sometimes they have like a standard booking rate. It really depends. So if you know that your preferred vendor of choice books up at a certain time of the year, you should probably test early.
Yep. And that's a good question to ask because, you know, how far out their book starts giving me the idea of, you know, when can they start? You know, when can I start scheduling this? You know, is it, hey, they're open anytime now, or is it, hey, give us 4 weeks and we can start going, or 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever it is. That's huge. And how much time will that scope require? So how many weeks do I need in the scope that I'm providing? Yeah,
I would definitely say this should be a range.
Right.
If
expect a range, you're not going to get the exact.
It's
going to be 50 hours. It's going to be 80 hours. You're not going to get hours. You're not going to get days. You're probably going to expect 4 to 6 weeks or 4 to 8 weeks.
I would really say we were talking about big box shops earlier.
Right.
I would say they're the most likely to give you a time right then and there because they don't have anything customized or anything bespoke. They just, okay, our standard pen test is a week for a web app. That's it. Sure. End of story. So I would say from a reliable source, you should be a little bit flexible on their answer.
Right. SLAs.
Yeah. So if you find like a critical vulnerability, how long does the team have to report it? How long does it take to hear from a team about a remediation step? Those kind of things.
If I tell you to stop because either we saw you go out of scope or you've taken an app down, out of nowhere, and we're experiencing production issues. We don't know if it's you or not. We're just out of an abundance of caution, just want to stop, activity. How fast do you respond on those?
Yeah.
And do you have a means for us to like pick up a bat phone and call you and be like, stop everything?
Now, I will say, OJ, I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second. We were just looking at a site that talked about VAPT, and we didn't talk about VAPT last episode.
Correct.
But with VAPT, there is one benefit.
What does VAPT mean, by the way?
Vulnerability and penetration, vulnerability analysis and penetration testing. But one benefit it does have, because it's all automated, is that it usually comes with a big red button.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, usually you don't have to communicate that. You just gotta go boom.
Ooh, what does this button do?
Yeah, not to play devil's advocate or anything.
Tell me about the team. What kind of credentials does your team have? How much experience does your team have?
Yeah.
Is your team like hundreds of people, tens of people, one person?
I would say that's a really good place to start, and also the team's makeup. So like, is there going to be a technical engagement manager? Is there going to be like quality assurance, stuff like that? But the team itself should have a good amount of experience, something more than the Security Plus and Pentest Plus.
Right.
I don't really care if you don't have certifications or you don't have like a standard degree, but something should be earned, even if that's just like years. So like something like I have 10 years of experience is something meaningful, Exactly. So you may or may not get the exact tester that you want. Or if it's a mom and pop shop and there's only one tester, then...
Right. Maybe the person talking to you, literally selling you the pen test, is the person who's going to be getting into your environment in, a few days.
Could be.
That's definitely true. And, having that team makeup's interesting, because is the same person who's testing my pens also the same person writing the report? Or do you have a team just for recon? Do they hand that off to people who get initial foothold? Do they hand that off to post exploitation? Do they hand off to report writing? And then do they hand off to people who do your report out?
Yeah, or is it all the same person?
Or is it all, it's a team of 3 people and they just kind of all share these roles and roll it up? Absolutely. Or it's one person.
Yeah.
That's really important. Who's going to be handling your stuff at what team? Do you have people who are specialized in particular apps? Maybe you have maybe you have someone who's specifically an IoT person.
Yeah.
Great. If you're manufacturing and you're getting a pen test and nobody on the team has OT experience, hang up the phone. Maybe be a little kinder than that, but it's when you're shopping for pen tests, these are the questions you should ask. And that actually kind of brings up a good question. Do you specialize in anything? Especially what I'm asking for.
Right.
Is this something you get a lot of call for? Is it your specialty? Is it something you've done before? Or am I going to be your first?
Right. I would definitely say be careful when you are like the first, but that's
Keep
not
it in mind, but
it's not necessarily a red flag. Especially if there are adjacent skills. So like, I don't know, like for example, a lunatic made a rocket ship, okay? And this rocket ship has no security. It may be that no lunatic has ever built a rocket ship like that before.
Right.
So it's new to somebody.
Right.
But they should have adjacent skills.
Yes.
So like, maybe don't be so concerned if it's the first, but you want at least some foundation.
Yeah, something's got to be everybody's first.
Yeah.
But maybe don't trust like a super important pen test.
Right.
To, somebody that doesn't have any experience in that.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Especially not like a critical pen test, but like if it's like your first round with a product and you made a really unique product, then
it's the first for everyone.
Exactly.
So I guess that makes a lot of sense. And then kind of like specializations, there's also tools.
Yes.
Right? So what kinds of tools do those people use?
And that'll also tell you about how tool heavy they are. Depending on what tools they're using, it could be very automated or very scanny. If you're relying on Burp Suite and Metasploit alone, we'll talk about that red flag.
If you see only 2 tools in their methodologies and tool sets, that's probably not a good sign.
You know what's a green flag though? When they have a list of their own tools that they've like donated to the open source community.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, that tool that everyone uses, we did that.
It's ours.
Or we've contributed heavily to that.
Yeah.
Like those modules, those are ours.
Exactly.
Even if it is Metasploit modules.
Yeah.
Like, hey, we've committed Metasploit modules to the Metasploit framework.
Exactly.
That's great. I like seeing that kind of stuff because it means they're actively engaged in the community. It's actively engaged in and also building their tools, because people who build their tools are very different than people who run tools. You need both, but people who build tools understand how to see a situation and solve a problem for that situation. So when they come into your environment, there's possibilities. If you get the right pen tester, they've built a tool specifically just to deal with you. and then they were like, I have other customers that do something similar. And then they built that tool, generalized it, and now they're using it across different customers. But it's very possible that they develop off of you.
Yes.
Which means they get to know your environment better, potentially even become a pretty good partner. You know, regardless of pen testing, just good partner and could be good advisories. You can really take a pen test firm and become more than just the pen test. You know, it can be
Your trusted advisor.
It could be a trusted advisor, exactly. Because when you're dealing with a pen test, you are dealing with application security professionals to a degree, right? And they can help you with building maybe how do we build a better SDLC? How do we build better DevOps? How do we build better this? Even though they're on the more offensive side, a good pen testing firm should probably think a little defensively of how do we actually fix these things. You know, it's not enough just to knock the door down.
Right.
How do you fix it? How do you make it to where this door can't be knocked down in the future?
Yeah, and I think if you were a customer, the best way to ask for that would be samples of remediation steps.
Yeah, and a sample report should show a sample issue and how detailed does your recommendation to fix it?
Exactly.
Patch.
That's not a good one.
That's not probably a good one.
No.
But cross-site scripting, stop cross-site scripting. You know, like that's not a good like you should show specific examples and be specific to the situation involved. You're doing this specifically with JavaScript. You should be doing this instead, and this may even be, you know, a larger issue on the back end or something, you know. And then, you know, you should also say, what questions do you have? But really, one of the ones you should ask along those lines is, what are your requirements? What do you need from us for you to do the pen test?
And those answers will probably sound like accounts, VPNs, devices, background checks, onboarding questionnaires, HR stuff.
Yeah, there may be some HR stuff that you need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, depending on your region, right?
Yes.
Some regions, some compliance requirements and regulations may require that your pen testers have a background check.
Yes.
Or that they be citizens of particular locales. And that's how, and they need to be in that locale while they're doing the pen test for this area. Yeah,
and I think it's really important to be upfront with your pen testing firm because you don't want to find that out like later.
No, exactly. And that's something you may want to talk with the pen test firm about. If you're a multinational company where you've got, you know, China, India, Europe, and the UK, because that's 2 separate places for sure now. And then, you know, America, when you've got 4 different places, can they support you in all those 4 places? Do you have regulations? And maybe you need to go talk to your lawyers and compliance folks now. Hey, do we have any regulations that state we've got to keep certain data in certain places? So if your American pen testing firm goes and takes data out of Europe that turns out to be purchaser or credit card information or other things like that, maybe you just took data out and now you're violating GDPR or whatever, and you need to notify people. Oh, well, we had NDAs and everything. Not good enough. Data left that locale. Are they capable of spinning up infrastructure in that locale so at least when they're putting a point of presence in that location, it stays in that geolocale? There's a lot of different ways to solve that. And sometimes it's just simply we have German pen testers.
Yeah.
We have Indian pen testers. We have Chinese pen testers. Yeah. it could just be simply, or we farm that particular section out. They could use a third. That's another great question I didn't think about. Do you use third parties for anything? Do you farm some of this out?
It's a good question to ask.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing for everyone. Sometimes you've just got a specialization that we don't do. We'll take care of the rest of everything. But for this one thing, we're going to get this firm over here to jump in with us and help.
Yeah, okay, so maybe I'll take that. That's not such a red flag when you put it that way. I thought you meant like the word farming has this really negative connotation to it. So I would be really careful about that. That definitely has a negative connotation. But actually what you said is actually kind of a green flag. If a company can come back and say like, hey, if they say something like, we do pen tests, not IR. But we have a partner company who does IR. We've done business with them.
Right.
You know, maybe they do your IR. And you can recommend them, or you have like really good customer reviews to say, hey, our friends over here in IR land can help you. Green flag.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, you know, we've basically talked to our pen test firm. Thank you, pen test firm. And we've figured out everything we need, you know, and said, hey, we like this particular pen test firm, and you're starting to go through your procurement process and everything. So that's all. The money's happening, the business is happening. But there are still things you need before. Let's say you have a start date in mind. You've got it on the calendar. There's work to do between you making the decision to pursue this and pursue this contract. You've got the pricing, you're good on it. There's between that pricing agreement and go live, or, you know, the go date, there's work to do.
Yes.
And there's even documentations to work on. Like making sure you have, well, hopefully you had an NDA probably a bit beforehand when you were going over the details of your environment, but definitely before the engagement starts, do you have an NDA?
Exactly. And I think we're not lawyers.
Right.
There are different types of NDAs.
NDAs.
NDAs are not NDAs.
They are not NDAs.
No. Especially for anyone who's important, NDAs are not NDAs.
Yep.
But there are different types, like mutual NDAs. It's really important to know whose paper you're going to use.
Yeah.
So it could be your NDA, their NDA. Yep. It really depends. The next document, though, which is my favorite thing in the whole world,
yes,
is the scoping agreement.
Yes.
And the scoping agreement should have things like the IP addresses that are in scope. If it's an internal pen test, I want to see things like live host count. About how many live hosts are there. If you just give me ranges, I have no idea how many. Right. It's not helpful.
Yeah, you give a /24, but how do I know all 255 are up?
Yeah, and like
running? Like maybe it's just 2, maybe it's 50.
Especially when it's many subnets, it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
Device names and versions, anything about devices. If you're doing something that requires sending hardware docs.
Right. How many versions of the hardware, or how many what do I say? How many instances of the hardware? You know, if you've got 5,000 of these machines, I don't know, do some Six Sigma black belt stuff and figure out, do I need 3? Do I need to send them 5? You know, what's statistically significant enough from a quality perspective to send this out to someone? Because who knows, maybe someone soldered a lead wrong and all of a sudden there's, you know, seg faults or memory leaking and a whole bunch of other stuff that you're now able to go like, oh, why is this pin giving me all this information? Oh, because someone soldered a trace wrong.
Right. API documentation.
Oh, yeah.
Big one. For cloud penetration tests, I would say like how many accounts, just basic info. Like,
yeah.
Big mistake.
No, do you mean like
I'm
accounts
so
as
about
in
to ask.
AWS accounts like that? Or do you mean like the actual user accounts and
I mean like accounts /subscriptions /projects.
Okay. Yeah.
Depending on your cloud provider of choices, vernacular.
Yes.
But I also mean like in that context, let's say it was AWS.
Right.
You know how AWS has like accounts and then organizational accounts?
Yes.
I'm not talking about like we have one organizational account.
Right.
That is not helpful.
Yeah.
I want to know like how big it is, like how many resources or network assets there are.
Because one account could be like the dev environment for your R&D team.
Right.
And the prod environment for your R&D team. It could be it could be a particular line of business's production environment versus their non-prod environment. And then you have corporate, you know, all sorts of accounts exist for all kinds of reasons.
Yeah. Are you using any containerization? I need to know.
Right.
Spill all the tea about your cloud environment to me.
Yeah. But all that kind of stuff should be in a scoping agreement, especially for, basically saying this is the stuff we're testing. Scoping agreement's important here because, as you can tell, it's giving them permission on what to actually engage on.
Right.
Because if you give IP addresses that belong to the wrong entity, like, oh no, that was supposed to be 10, or no, maybe it can't be 10. That was supposed to be 11.14/ whatever, not 12.14/ whatever. You made a typo. Well, guess what? You now went to a completely different point of the internet, and those people may not have enjoyed a free pen test, especially if someone got domain admin.
Yeah.
Especially if it's not just a vuln scan, not just some light level exploitation. If it was going all the way in.
Yeah.
Yikes. Which kind of brings up another section, which is mutual indemnification. Hashtag not a lawyer.
I'm not a lawyer. Actually, funny story. I wanted to be a lawyer when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Right? And I thought I was going to go to law school, and I even prepared to go to a law school university. And the one day I was like, nah. So let me tell you guys, I'm not qualified to be a lawyer anyway.
So mutual indemnification.
Yeah.
And what we mean by that. So indemnification is essentially where you say, we're going to hold each other harmless if we basically are the ones who cause harm to other people. So that's kind of an interesting thing. So if I indemnify you, essentially what I'm saying is I hold you harmless. And if you get sued, then I'm going to be paying for your legal fees. I'm going to basically, if you get findings against you or whatever in fines, I have to pay that.
I see.
You're making, it's a way of making you whole for getting in business with me and having caused a bunch of problems, but you did it on my behalf, right? So there's a mutual indemnification. So in this case, if I, as the company, give you a bad scope, maybe I gave you a competitor's IP space. Hopefully your
Please don't do that.
Hopefully your recon also finds out that it's not our assets. So, but let's say not. Let's say someone just went for it. Yeah. Mutual indemnification in this case would mean that that essentially I'm on the hook for that, and essentially it's a little bit of your get out of jail free card in that respect. A scoping agreement definitely helps, because then if they come back to the pen test firm and then they say, oh well, this is the IP space my customer gave me, so that's why I tested it. That's supposed to redirect any lawsuits to you. If they still get sued, well, we're going to pay your attorney's fees for essentially getting your side of it dismissed or getting you thrown out of the case. We're going to take the full brunt of that, and we'll pay your attorney's fees. Flip that around. Let's say I gave you a good scope as a pen test firm, and you ended up...
we had a typo.
Yeah. You had a typo. You did something wrong. Well, you're going to hold me harmless because I didn't send you after those folks. But as we know, when you sue someone, everybody gets sued. So they're going to sue us because we were the client, and we're going to go, whoa, whoa, whoa. We can prove in this agreement we gave you the right scope.
Correct.
You went out of scope, and so you're going to hold that, and you're going to pay our attorney's fees for fighting that little fight there to get us out of this. So there's a bit of mutual indemnification. I'm sure there's a lot of other scenarios that could play out, but those are just the two that really pop in my head.
Yeah.
Mutual indemnification is very important. And I will tell you what, we're not to red flags yet, but it's a red flag. If someone is not putting an indemnifier in their scoping agreement, they're not even willing to cover their own rear.
Yeah, I would just...
Which makes me worried.
I would just make a note of that. Depending on how the pen testing firm works, it may be in a SAL, it might be in an MSA, it might not be in a scoping document.
Right.
It's got to be somewhere.
Somewhere there has to be an indemnifier in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, mutual indemnifier, very important.
Yeah. Please, don't insinuate. I would never go out of scope. Never.
So contact lists.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a plan, some list of, hey, here's how to get a hold of us, right? Let's say you need to get a hold of us because you found a critical issue.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, we can't wait for the report. You need to fix this now.
I think we talked about that a little bit earlier with SLA. Stuff like
Right.
that should have an SLA, so I should have to call you.
Exactly.
But maybe I don't want to call you. Maybe something else. I need to call your procurement office.
Right.
There's a billing issue, whatever. You need all of that contact information, not just one point of contact.
Exactly.
Especially if you're testing, like in Q4, like right now, where people are on holiday and whatnot.
Yep.
You need backups. You need like the call for the person who didn't pick up the phone's call and
Yep.
all that.
I would say have 3 or 4 levels of calling. You know, have maybe your AppSec or maybe even your vulnerability management people, maybe your red teamers if you have internal red teamers, then maybe a director above them, then maybe the CISO, and maybe even the SOC. Because simply, hey, we're doing stuff here, the SOC might be interested. So maybe even have the SOC as kind of like the second or third place as well. So
Kind of hard to do if you do a no knowledge test, though.
True, but I would imagine at some point you're calling someone there who has some very high level knowledge, maybe that
Right.
something's going on. I just don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
Hey, we're trying to get a hold of this person. Is anybody there?
Yeah.
We need to call somebody else. Maybe it is procurement also. Maybe it's just, hey, someone at that company knows someone. We
Yeah.
need to talk to someone about something. Is the CISO online? Who is there that I can talk to about this issue? You need a way to do that. And you also need contact lists for the pen tester.
Yes.
Either the pen testing lead, who's going to be actually doing the pen test,
Needs the PM.
the account, the account person that you can call because they will know people to call internally. There could be a lot of, but what communication plan do you basically have?
Right.
Between firm and customer.
Yeah. Are you going to use Slack? Are you going to
Right.
push email notifications? Yeah. Important to know.
I think you had this idea, which was a mini DR plan.
Yeah. It's not something that I have people talk about like directly, but there needs to be a plan. Like if you do knock a server over, it kind of goes with your contact list and plan, but what are you going to do next? You as the buyer, I would hope that you would have some sort of plan for if we did knock something over,
Right.
if we found a vulnerability that was so critical, if we found indicators of compromise, like you need a plan to kind of protect yourself. And that kind of goes with the same like area as being ready to remediate.
Right.
You also need the right people involved.
Yes.
So stakeholders, board members, leads of projects.
Do board members really get involved in pen tests that much?
Okay, I guess it's really with small companies.
Yeah. No, I mean I've never worked for that small of a company where the board is ordering the pen test.
Yeah.
Audit committee, I suppose, can order a pen test. So that would make sense.
No, I've definitely seen accounts that are driven by board member demand.
That I've seen too. Like,
Yeah.
hey, we need a pen test. CISO, go get a pen test.
Yeah.
I've seen that, but I've not seen like, oh, we have boards on our contact list to go like a board of director. I've just not seen that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm learning things. So a mini DR plan, get the stakeholders associated, identified, and at least know how to contact them in a hurry.
Yeah.
Know how to shut out your pen testers if you need to in a hurry for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not answering their phones and you need them to stop.
What IPs are they coming from?
That's actually a great thing to have in the scoping agreement too. What IPs are they coming from? Right? And rules of engagement. What times are you going to allow them to test?
Blackout times. Yeah.
Are they on holidays at certain times? We're on holidays at certain times, and we will not be able to support you if something goes down. So let's not test during these times.
I know it seems like a really good idea at Q4 to be like, yeah, test during the Christmas week. Everyone will love it because we get done in time. No. Your on-call people will hate you forever if you do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the stakeholders that we mentioned and the people who lead the apps or the infrastructure. So, like the engineers who are directly involved.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's it. And I think now we get to go to the fun part.
Yes, which are the red flags. So these are basically, and we've been hitting on some of them because as we've been talking about what you should be doing, it's easy to contrast what you shouldn't do or what they shouldn't do. And so, we've already teased some of these red flags. But probably one of my first red flags, just you're already deep into an engagement, I'd say you're more in the not early planning phase, but you're in the pre-execution phase. They haven't done anything yet, but they're like, no scoping agreement.
Yeah.
We're not doing a scoping agreement. Maybe they're not outright refusing, but they're not positively putting forth, here's our rules of engagement, or here's our scoping agreement. Here's something that basically talks about all the things we just talked about and what you need, even something rudimentary.
Those scoping agreements can look really different.
Yes.
They can be customized scopes. They can be time box scopes. They could be like those off-the-shelf scopes we talked about. Yep. There just needs to be a scoping agreement.
Yes.
They may look different to everyone, but it needs to be present.
Because I want to cover my rear.
Yes.
But if my vendor, and I don't care what vendor it is, Pentest or otherwise, if they're not even going to cover their own rear,
oh yeah,
that could be very yikes. That could be very dangerous to me. I don't know what they're capable of if they're not willing to cover their own rear. And if they definitely don't know they need to cover their own rear, who are you dealing with?
Yeah.
That should make you want to go, we are going to back away and maybe we're going to ask for this refund. Hopefully we haven't cut the check yet.
Yeah.
Let's maybe back out of this because that's pretty bad.
So speaking of scoping agreements, I think that another CYA that's really important is to have cyber insurance. Right. I know cyber insurance can be a hot topic. Not everyone agrees, but it's just kind of the cost of doing business.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a contractor coming to your house. Mm-hmm. You want to make sure they're insured and bonded because if they cause damage to your property, other people's property, they get the wrong driveway. I've seen some TikToks of contractors getting the wrong driveway, scooping out all the concrete and then going, oh crap, who do you make a complaint against? Who do you make a claim against? Sure, they could maybe cut you a check or fix it or make you whole personally, but you want, at the end of the day, if they're saying no, go away, you want to say, we know the insurance company, we know the bonding agent, so that way you can go through and make sure that you get your recompense. So in cyber, I would imagine it's the same thing. If you somehow caused problems that you are liable for, cyber insurance would cover that.
Exactly.
Yeah. But so yeah, not having cyber insurance or some kind of errors and omissions or something that is going to cover your organization and the people who are employed by your organization are very important. And yeah, not having those is like not having a scoping agreement. You're not even willing to CYA. That's a red flag to me. What's another red flag?
Thank you for asking. A big red flag is when they're willing to start tomorrow.
Oh, yikes.
We talked about all those things that you need before you could start a pen test, and that's not an email. Right. That is planning. That's like a phone call. That's sending documents. It's a lot of signatures, a lot of DocuSigns.
Right.
There's no way you could start tomorrow.
Yeah, because the other thing is you as a company can't start tomorrow either because... Right. Well, I guess depending on scope, phone scan, maybe sure you could start tomorrow, but maybe. But if you're doing an app pen test or device pen test or something, you've got preparation. You've got to make accounts ready. If it's a fully transparent type of test, maybe you need multiple permission level accounts provisioned and give that to the pen tester. Device, how many devices do you give? That takes time.
Yep.
Yeah. That takes time. Starting tomorrow. Sure.
Seems convenient.
Yeah, it seems convenient.
You wish it could happen, but it can't.
Yeah.
What about you? What are some other red flags?
They won't tell me what the creds of the testers are. So we talked about that bit in the what questions should you ask? They're not going to specify any creds or experience of their testers.
Yeah. Hey, Mr. Buyer, what kind of creds would you like to see?
That's a fantastic question, right? And so do you know the types of certifications, the types of frameworks, the familiarity with things? You almost need to think like, what's your job description, right? What type of job descriptions exist out there for pen testers? And are you seeing that with the firms that you're seeing out there? Do they have those same types of skill sets, or at least are they claiming it? Because anybody could claim anything. They could say I'm an OSCP and they've only done the OSCP labs. They've never actually got the cert.
Well, I mean, isn't there like a verify? Like, doesn't the OSCP have a verification website for that?
Yeah, there are.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I've ever seen a pen testing firm say, "Here's our actual IDs."
Yeah, I don't think I've seen that either. Actually.
Yeah. So in that way, it's not like a JD where you give an application, you say, "Here's my CISSP and here's my number, so you can go verify me." Yeah. So another thing is, with creds of testers, one of the creds could simply be they contribute to the open source community.
Absolutely. And I would take that kind of seriously. It could be code, it could be talks, it could be volunteering, it could be an instructor sort of role, a mentor role, contributing to the community, and I would say specifically tools as well.
Yeah.
It's a really good indication.
Vuln research.
Especially proof of concepts.
Yeah.
If they're able to
POC
develop,
or GTFO.
yeah, if they're able to develop proof of concepts, I think that's a really strong indication of what they're willing to do for you. So
POC or GTFO. What about companies that put their price openly on the website?
So I'm really glad that this is a talk that is our opinions and not the opinions of our employers. Because for Alyssa, this is a really big red flag. Personally feel like if something's willing to especially attract on price, like if that is a motivator, a selling point, it is a direct indication of the quality of work. We kind of talked about the race to the bottom and whatnot. It's the mills that have the price on the website.
Yes.
Yeah. And that might be, I'm not saying like ranges are bad. Like someone might put down like our pen test start at blank and go up from there.
Right.
But when you see this pen test will cost you $3,000.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Big red flag. How do you know how big the environment is?
$7,500 per target.
Yeah.
Target. What's a target?
What's
IP?
a target?
Is it an app URL?
Is it a port that's open? Is it an asset?
Right.
Yeah.
But even that, you're just putting a price to a target, regardless of its complexity, regardless of, what the engagement is. I mean, there's so many more questions to ask before you start getting into, we're going to give you a price.
Absolutely. There's just so much scoping that goes on that's really important. And I think I missed the opportunity to talk about it before, but the pen testing company you should be talking to should kind of be like your therapist, asking you all these questions and getting really in detail. And that does take time, right? If you're not willing to like give that information out, I don't know.
Yeah. And kind of going along with price is being willing to compromise on your quality in order to give that lower price. Like, well, I guess we can throw this to the juniors,
Yeah.
so that maybe we can charge you half.
I would say that when a company is so focused on letting you know that you're getting a deal, there's something fishy about that.
Yeah.
There's something fishy. Like, hey, we'll do it for the cheapest. Okay, but why?
Right. Why?
Yeah.
We were out and about shopping earlier, and one of the questions we were asking as we were going through one of the more pricey places, we did not see a price tag in a particular item.
Yeah.
And one of the things we basically said to ourselves, if you have to ask for the price, you can't afford it. And that we kind of just left it at that. And that's kind of, it's kind of one of those things with pen tests is, you kind of come to places where, if you're trying to lower the price and lower the quality, you're okay with quality being lowered if it lowers the price. I don't know. It's like asking a chef to cook me a half decent steak and take like $20 off. You know? Like if I'm going to go to a really nice steak restaurant, where it's like, I don't know, $70 for a steak. And I say, you know what? I don't want to pay $70. Can you just not cook it so well? Not do just so good of it. You don't have to do your best job on this steak, but can I have $20 off the steak?
And you don't need to buy the $350 scrunchie, but you should have at least some willingness to understand what quality you're looking for.
Yeah.
I think knowing your price up front internally, not even you're going to tell the pen testing team, right? But knowing that price internally and saying to yourself, like, this is how much we're willing to spend should be something you figure out way ahead of time, and like how much effort you're going to put into that budget.
Because that's really what it should be about, regardless of the level of effort. The level of effort should be quality.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, just don't do it.
Yeah. And that's really what you should do. And maybe that's the thing that's not so much of a red flag, is willing to turn down the level of effort. So maybe we don't go for, all the whiz bangs and whistles that you could possibly do with maybe a red team. Maybe we do walk it back to more of a pen test, right? To make sure that we can get it down. We haven't turned the quality down. We're still going to get a quality pen test, but we're not going to get that red team. We're going to get a lower level of effort, but still a quality level of effort.
You know what I think is a green flag? I think it's a green flag when the company is going to be upfront telling you that gradient.
Yeah.
So when that company says like, hey, you could have a red team right now and we're prepared to give you that red team, but we really think that you're more of a point in time, like continuous, whatever test, then that's a green flag, in my opinion. When they say like, hey, this is everything in the kitchen sink, this is what we think a good test is, and here's literally the bare minimum, don't ask us for less. I think that's a green flag.
Yeah. Green flags.
Green flag.
But returning back to red flags. So we talked about pricing issues, communications issues. If during the sales cycle, it is hard to get information from these folks. It's hard to get them to get back to you. And I'm not even talking about just the pricing. I'm talking about methodology, sample reports, follow-ons that you had to your first meeting. And I don't mean, get that to me by end of day. I mean, I've waited 2 days. You were supposed to have had it to me the next day. And if this is a pattern that's behaving, how are they going to act like during the pen test when you do need them to respond very quickly in those situations?
I think frequency is important.
Yeah.
I think that if you engage in a pen test team and they're taking a while to maybe understand your product or something, your salesperson should just be like, hey, OJ, how you doing? We're working on your thing. In the meantime, do you need anything?
Exactly.
How communicative are they? How accommodating are they?
Yeah. Are they the ones reaching out, or are you having to reach out each time?
Exactly.
Catch them up.
Exactly.
Yeah. And along with communications, maybe you're the one asking all the questions.
It definitely needs to be a two-way street. If your pen testing company is not asking you things like your assets, what your drivers are, what your goals are, when does this need to get done, they're going to ask you tough questions too. They might ask you, how much are you willing to spend? They might ask you what keeps you up at night, what is already vulnerable that you know about, what's your dirty laundry. They should ask comfortable and uncomfortable questions. And without those questions, if they're just yeah, we'll do it, red flag.
Yeah, exactly. And then, kind of get back to that paperwork. If they're giving you NDAs or they're giving you this, regardless, I guess if it's your paper, you're giving them, say, no, we don't want your NDA. We actually want our NDA. We want our MSA. We want this. We want this. Not putting red lines of their own.
Yeah, I would say it's incredibly rare. Did they even read the
agreement?
Yeah, it's incredibly rare. Maybe if you're a company that has a long-standing relationship with each other, and you
already know what each other's going to do.
Exactly. But in general, you should at least have some sort of indication that they've looked it over.
Yeah.
And I've never met someone with a perfect just goes through.
I have never seen a contract in any procurement I've been in where red lines were just automatically accepted. There is usually sometimes it's just a matter of we are choosing one word to look in a thesaurus and choose a different word, and that's it. It means the same thing, but they're more comfortable with this word or this 3-word phrase instead. It's the, hey, you read, you actually read the agreement. You made a change, and it's minimum level of effort. Communication. It's like the old, I went to McDonald's and I told them to add more onions just so that they have to make it new and fresh, and they have to actually read the order and make it to order instead of just doing the regular thing they always do. I don't know. I don't know if that's a good analogy or not, but that's the analogy I have for that. If they're not going to do red lines on your paper, did they even really read it? And again, that attention to detail can permeate through to the report. It can permeate through to the scope. Did they read the scoping agreement themselves and go like, oh, what IP was that again?
I think all these red flags kind of have a similar theme.
Yeah.
They're all around communication, whether that's paper communication, digital communication.
Right.
It's all something around communication, and trust, I think, is the other one.
Yes.
The questioning and whatnot is to establish trust, to know these people know what they're doing, like they have the skills. It's all I think based around those two things: is communication and trust.
Yeah, and you should be looking for these things, and not just going to one pen tester. You should look. You should shop around. You should ask. You should ask some big box stores.
Yeah.
You should ask some of the little guys. You should ask some of the established boutiques out there.
If I was a buyer, I would ask for recommendations.
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Who are your recommendations?
And I don't want to see the same people that are on their website. Like, you know how every single pen test firm has, like, we work with these people.
Yeah.
Get like an actual story. Get like an actual case study.
Right.
So like a quote, like a direct quote, not just like so-and-so at this company says that. Like, I want to know the CISO of company A thinks that this place is awesome.
You know what they'll sometimes even do, and this is just vendors regardless. Sometimes what you can do is you can say, would one of your customers be willing to jump on like a 15 to 20 minute call with me?
Yes, exactly.
They're not going, don't have the vendor in the room. Just connect me with them, and I'm going to ask them for a reference.
Yeah.
Perfectly reasonable thing to do. And some customers, if they have no customers that are willing to do that, maybe they're not a big shop, so maybe it makes sense they don't have a lot of customers. If they're a big shop or even an established boutique, they should have at least one customer in their last year who's willing to jump on, because what that means is they partner with people.
Yeah.
And they are trusted. Someone likes them, and you need to hear that. And tell them to be candid. Were there bumps in the road? Were there lessons to be learned? Was there unexpected hiccups? Were they not strong in these areas? You know, and you know, maybe even ask your pen test firm, give me someone who has had a similar scope.
Yeah.
You know, had similar things to me. They're never going to be identical. Well, most of them won't be identical.
Most of them.
But give me someone who had some kind of similar scope if you can. And say, hey, I'm looking at something similar scope. How'd they do?
Exactly. I think that you might have mentioned mom and pops maybe can't do that. But like I said, anyone that has experience should be able to do that.
Right. So, yeah. And I mean, with that, really, we've kind of given you the real lowdown on what it really takes to figure out why you need a pen test, what types of places you can go to for pen tests, what places to stay away from, red flags to stay away from them, and things you should definitely make sure you have before letting that pen tester engage. So, you know, whether you're ready to take a pen test now and take your pen test, get a pen test, or whether you're just going to start off on your baby's first vulnerability scan, we hope this has given you some good insights. Do you agree with anything we said? Maybe disagree. I love disagreements in the comments, by the way. I love when people say, I don't know about that.
I'm sensitive, guys. Be nice to me.
Be nice to DNS. But when you can amicably disagree with someone and provide a different idea, I love hearing things that I've never heard before and go, oh, I haven't thought about it that way.
Yeah.
So maybe you've had a pen test nightmare. Maybe you have been the pen tester who had a pen test nightmare customer. We love to hear those different kinds of stories from either side of the aisle there. Yeah, hit us down in the comments. Find us on social media, and I'll at least see you in the next one.
See ya.